Do all of you recognise this symbol?
Yes.
Yes, it's the symbol of the Soil Association. The Soil Association is the founding body of organics in this country. It was set up by soil scientists who were concerned about the loss of soil around the world, more than anything else. And this was at the time of the Second World War. They were also joined by another bunch of people called the Macarison Society, who were doctors who were concerned about the lack of health and vitality in people living on processed foods. Something that goes very well together with the organic movement. And there were some absolutely fascinating things done in the early years. One of the best little bits I can tell you about is the Soil Association had a little tent at the Royal Show in 1946, as soon as the Second World War was over. And they put it up next to the Ministry of Agriculture's huge marquee, which had a huge sign saying, "Come and see the farming of today." So the Soil Association made a little sign, "Come and see the farming of tomorrow." And it worked. Now, for years, and I was born literally fields away from where the Soil Association was founded in Suffolk. It had a farm there. And I used to wonder about these strange people, but they seemed no madder than the rest of the local farmers. And I did wonder where they got this symbol from, because I'd go on the radio and people would say, "What should we look out for?" I'd say, "Look for the Soil Association symbol on anything you're looking to buy, be it seeds, compost, plants, or nowadays you can actually find almost anything, including chocolate, woolly pullovers, cotton undies, all made without the use of chemicals." Cotton is one of the biggest users of chemicals worldwide. You can even, if you can't give it up, you can even get organic tobacco, apparently. After all, why do you want to smoke pesticides? The presenter would say to me, "Bob, please describe this symbol." And I would say, "Oh my God." Until Gardener's Question Time took me to a little island in the Irish Sea. And I looked up and I realised this is a pair of Y fronts from the Isle of Man. Now, I'm a life member of the Soil Association, but I do fear if the committee ever hear this joke, I'll be off it. Anyway, the Soil Association standards were set up for farmers. Right? It was to protect people buying organic food, to make sure that it was organic. And most of the costs are in the policing of the system, not in the growing. It doesn't cost much more to grow most things organically than it does conventionally. In fact, some organic farmers growing some things are finding it cheaper because they're not buying fertilizers, they're not buying pesticides, they're not having to fill out health and safety forms for using things. And so there are a lot of advantages. And indeed, the only crop, and this is very ironic, the only crops that farmers will get less with is the cereals. And one reason is that cereals are one of the few groups of plants that have very few mycorrhizal fungi growing on the roots which help them. And again, from that it's rather ironic that Rothamsted, the great research institution, and it is, has spent all the last 200 years nearly researching cereals, because they would therefore not show the importance of mycorrhizal fungi, and they wouldn't see the importance of actually improving the soil quality, because cereals are one of the few things that can just about survive with an impoverished soil and given purely chemical fertilizer. It's all very ironic. However, even more so, if I told you I'm going to do a trial of compost versus manure versus soluble fertilizers, you would have in your head some idea of what compost is, yes? They took straw bales, rotted it down with fertilizer to make compost, and then tested it against manure, and of course found it wasn't quite as good. Well, it wouldn't be. That's not compost. And again, the Rothamsted experiments have always shown that manure has given the best results. But then they said, but there isn't enough manure, so we recommend artificial fertilizers. It's not that they were wrong, it's just they were inappropriate. And there's so much of our modern science is based on things that aren't wrong, but they didn't really look at the whole question. Back in 1946 again, Long Ashton Research Station were trying to grow more blackcurrants so more people could have more blackcurrant jam. And they found that by doubling the inputs of fertilizers, they could double the output of blackcurrants. But they noted, And you can go and look this up. It's Stone and Pollard, if you want to look at the research papers. They found that as they doubled the weight of blackcurrants produced per acre, the vitamin C level fell by nearly half. So everyone got some blackcurrants, but they weren't quite as good for you as they were before. Do you think farmers use less fertiliser now? They sell by tonnes. Right? They want the maximum weight of blackcurrants. And so there's been this continuous slow removal of quality from the way we eat. If you want the best quality, eat organic. But it's no better than your grandfather would have found. People think organic is something special. It's not. It's the way the best always was. It's that almost everything else we're sold has been degraded. Simple test. Many of you may not eat meat, some of you may. Well, I'm sure you've all seen the two for very little, say a 5 or a 10 of chickens being sold in some supermarkets. If you took one of those and you went back to your great-grandfather and you gave him one of those and an organic one, which would he say was the right thing for Sunday lunch? It's all a question of flavour. Now, I am very pro-organic. Oh, I would be, wouldn't I? But I've been to agricultural college. I have here a copy of my certificate of competence. I'm qualified to use all the pesticides I spur. And believe me, I even had a strychnine licence for years. So don't cross me. Seriously though, one of the ironies of it all is that if you want to use a pesticide, and there are places where they have the uses, I have no problem at all in a hired contractor who's professionally qualified using weed killers on a tarmac car park. Because if you don't, the tarmac will be broken up by the weeds and there'll be more ecological damage when you have to re-tarmac in a few years' time. There are times and places for everything. You know, I'm sure most of you wouldn't take an antibiotic for a sore throat nowadays. But if you get gangrene, be praised you do have a choice of an antibiotic. I, for years, used to look after a factory site, used to do the landscaping for it, and they had equisetum, you know, the mares or horsetails as some people call it, coming through the foundations. I was spraying it for 3 years with everything I could use as a professional, and I couldn't kill it. I had to say to the guy, look, I'm sorry, I can't take your money anymore. I just feel bad about this. And the reason is, if you've got equisetum, you've got bindweed in your garden, and you haven't got 15 acres, we've all got neighbours, if the bindweed's in their garden too, so you get rid of it in your garden, how long is it going to take to be back again? Yeah? A matter of weeks in the summer. And I did consultancies, go and give people advice. The lady had chosen a beautiful little cottage nestling in this lovely vale of meadows down a lane. The only trouble was, all round her, the meadows weren't meadows, they were equisetum. Right? Knee-high in places, even taller. And she said, what am I going to do? The whole garden is full of it. What can I spray it with? I said, well, even if you use nuclear munitions, it'll be back. Because it's on all 4 sides. How could you get rid of it? You can dig a slit trench with a JCB, line it with heavy-duty plastic, and you'll keep it out for a week. Yeah? Same, there's others, bamboo. You know, I mean, once you've let bamboo in, some of them, you've got to actually dig it out skillfully by hand and then keep doing it for a long while. It'll come up through concrete. It'll push a paving slab up. Now, there are things you cannot deal with by any sensible means. You have to work around it. This lady wanted to have a beautiful garden. Well, we did it for her. We put in nothing but trees and roses on 3-foot stems and other standard plants, so that each could be given a little plastic guard and trimmed around with a nylon trimmer, and then everything was cut with a lawnmower. It looked beautiful, and we had vases full of coloured flowers to make the place look prettier, and she sold it quick and moved to somewhere where she could garden. Right? There's always a workaround. Now, I'm not against the use of chemicals per se, but I'm against the general use of pesticides and weed killers in people's gardens. You're wasting your money. Right? There's usually an easier, more efficient way for almost all of these things. And I sometimes find it rather amazing. Years ago I was on the programme and somebody had radishes with flea beetles. You know flea beetles? Yeah, they jump when you move your hand near the seedlings. You grow brassicas, you grow spinaches, almost anything will have little tiny holes like somebody's pricked them with a pin. And when you put your hands near it, you see little things jumping up, really tiny. Those are flea beetles. They're called flea because they jump. Now, one of the others on the panel recommended going in And it was a systemic insecticide, so that it's in the plant that you're going to eat. But it's perfectly safe, of course. So was thalidomide. Anyway, they recommended it. I said, how much is that a bottle? And they said, oh, £3 or £4. I said, oh, it'll do several crops, but how much are the radishes worth? 50p. And I said, you know, it's a really expensive option for radish. Why not sow another lot of radishes? And if you keep the bed wet, then the flea beetle won't be so happy. But a much simpler thing. Take a bit of cardboard, put some golden syrup on it, wave it over them. Bing, 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 bing. There they are, and you put it on the bird table. And I have a friend in Norfolk who grows turnips. You know, Norfolk, great turnip growing county. Used to be anyway. It's a bit dry for us now. Anyone having trouble with turnips, try a little bone meal in your soil. It's an old trick, but it often works. Anyway, he had trouble with flea beetle on his turnip crops. Now, in the days when we had lots of sheep, they would drive the sheep through the turnips when they were young. And sheep put their feet quite carefully. So they try not to stand on plants, but will stand on the bare soil, if they can. And the dust that they would make would then coat everything with dust. The plants would grow away, but the flea beetles, big little insects, and they have external skeletons. So if they get dust in their joints, they kind of get cemented up and they can't move. And that would work, but he couldn't find sheep. But he heard about this trick with the golden syrup, so he took molasses, put a plank on the front of his tractor, close to the ground, covered it in molasses, drove slowly down the field. And at the end, he could scrape off a layer of flea beetles and give it to his chickens. And it reduced the number sufficiently that the crops survived. And this is it. He didn't need to get rid of all of them, he just needed to get rid of enough. And this is the whole point. We're trying to cure a problem, to get round something, rather than actually get rid of what something is. I don't want to get rid of anything. I now have a snail prison. I call it snail Catraz. And the reason is that I didn't want to keep killing snails. Who's got a snail or a slug problem here? This year? Come on, everybody's got a snail. Wait for another few weeks when it warms up. Okay. The whole point is this. You can't get rid of them, can you? And even if you do, more will come in from outside, you know, that's what happens. But if you're killing them, that's not nice. I don't like killing things unnecessarily. And I thought far better, and I have a laundry basket that stands in a pool of water, so they can't get out, and I put them in there, and they eat wastes and turn it into snail droppings. And then I wash out the snail droppings, and I give them to the plants as a feed. It's like they're animals. It's a manure. And think about it, in nature, we forget. One reason organic gardeners do so well is because we have a lot of things shitting in our garden. Next door, I had a neighbour who sprayed everything all the time with everything he could. Right? His garden it did look neat, but there was nothing living in there, nothing dropping its doo-doos on the soil. His soil was lacking in fertility. And though he put chemical fertilisers in, it didn't really, you know, all of you could live on a bag of sugar, a bag of flour and a pint of cooking oil. You wouldn't enjoy it, would you? You could survive on it. And that's what people are doing if they go to the chemical process. What we're after, who would like to sit down to a 15-course gourmet buffet? Of course you would. So do plants. And they expect to find snail droppings. They expect to find spider shit. Excuse my French, but really Anglo-Saxon is for gardeners. And there are 4 million spiders to an average acre of meadow or woodland. Right? Each one might not do very much, but that adds up in a year. And if you think about, if you can just encourage one more family of, say, blue tits in your garden, you know about the 20,000 caterpillars and insects that they will eat, and you think, oh, that's brilliant. Now, think about it at the other end. Each bird has to do, it's only 1 gram a day. But if you've got a family of 4 or 5, that's 4 or 5 grams a day. Right? That's an ounce a week. Right? That's 12 ounces a year. That's 3/4 pound of high-grade manure spread all over your car. And this is the whole point. Nature is expecting things like snail droppings and so on. And so my idea is not to get rid of them, but to make them work. And so my snails are paying off for their sins in the past. And it's amazing, they get through some... Who's got a wormery here? You can't put much through it, can you? Right? But it works. And the same with the snailery. It's not a replacement for a compost heap, But it will get rid of, actually they love cardboard and paper. It's surprising. And they produce quite a lot of doo-doos. It's good stuff. And much more pleasant to handle than pig droppings as well. Now, generally, most of us are gardeners, and we have problems with certain plants, certain crops. Okay, we'll let the first one off. Next one whose phone goes off, including me. Everyone turn them off. Next one who goes off gives £5 to Oxfam. All right, all agreed? Second one who goes off gives £10 to Oxfam. And if anyone makes the third one, you give 20, all right? Now, why do we need to control pests and diseases is to ensure, one, we get crops, if we're after crops, of sufficient quantity for us. We don't need to often control a pest or disease to get all the crop. After all, most years, if you get any, you get a surplus, don't you? There are years when it all fails. Who grows runner beans here? Hands up, please. Keep your hands up. Okay, hands up and keep them up if you grow runner beans and do the old-fashioned thing of digging a trench, filling it with a dead horse, wet newspaper, lots of compost and manure. Okay, leave out the horse. Does anyone do the proper job with a wet, soaked pile of newspaper up? One or two. Okay, can I ask you, how many carrier bags did you have to give away most years?
Not many, so I've got hungry boys in my house.
Okay, but the whole point is, the rest of you who didn't do the proper job, you all gave away carrier bags of runner beans most years too. The whole point is, if you get a crop, the difficulty is getting the runner beans out of the soil and up the first 6 inches. Most years, if you get the runner beans up to 2 or 3 feet, you get a crop and you get more than you need. Right? So there's no point actually, in some ways, trying to control any pest on runner beans. The whole difficulty with runner beans is not about increasing the yield. Right? It's about actually just having a warm start, maybe starting them off inside. And if you want more runner beans, put another foot on the row. It's a lot less work than digging a trench and filling it with wet newspaper. It's not that the advice from the past is wrong. It's somebody, £5 to Oxfam. Oh, we can do well here. We can save the world if we all work at it. The whole point is that often what they told us is not wrong, but it's inappropriate for us in our situation. Most gardening advice comes from horticulture, where people are selling for a living. And it makes a huge difference. Your yields per square yard and the quality. A simple thing, for instance, sweet corn. They will tell you you cannot grow more than one variety of modern sweet corn near another one, or they cross-pollinate and you lose all the benefit of the super sweet genes. You've all seen that, yeah? It is true if you're selling sweet corn, because the cobs have to be perfect and has to last about a month while they sit on the shelves in the supermarket. Most of you will pick your sweet corn and cook it, so what's the point of having a super sweet gene that keeps it sweet for a week? But more than that, I took 17 different varieties and grew them all next to each other, 2 plants of each in one bed. First of all, the earlies and the lates don't pollinate each other because they're not in flower at the same time. Secondly, those that did pollinate each other, what happened? I had a few cobs where one kernel was big or one was pink instead of yellow. Did it stop me eating it? It would have stopped me selling it. But it didn't stop me eating it. It didn't spoil the quality at all. And this is the whole thing, that when you look at the advice, where it comes from farming and agriculture, it's always trying to make you do hard work to get something you don't need or want anyway.